I think Dogecoin will go to $1 in the next month.
Doge to $1.
That's a tough one.
Is
there a
option? Can we make it conditional?
No, you gotta be.
Elon tweets about it again or not?
No. You have to friend or foe that. Justin put his neck on the line for it's going to hit a bump.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say foe.
I say friend. I feel like that is a all too reasonable prediction.
if Matt says friend, I'll put $25,000 in right now after this. Well, welcome to OnlyFriends, our show where our Silicon Valley chat group comes to life. I'm joined today by my amazing friends, Jamie Quint, Emmett Shear, and Matthew Fong are new to the show, but not new to our friendship. Not new to friendship. We've been friends for a long time. Matt, welcome. I'll just start off with some context. So Matt was my roommate from college. Emmett and I knew Matt from back at Yale, where he was pretty much my intro to Australia. I remember we used to argue all the time about whether Australians were more obese or Americans were more obese. I maintain it's Australians. You know, I don't know if there's been new data since 2005, but I'm pretty sure
you did actually prove me slightly wrong. Yeah, I thought Americans were way more obese, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
It's like neck and neck. It's like neck flap and neck flap. So, and then anyways, Matt and Emmett and I went on to start our first company together. Little known fact, because I feel like oftentimes, well, nobody really talks about Kiko, but when nobody does, you know, when they don't talk about it, they think, oh, Emmett and I started this company. It's an internet calendar company, but we have you to thank for our entrepreneurship, actually, because you were the one who first came to me when we were seniors or when we were juniors in college and said, hey, we should start a company. You remember that?
That's right. I remember Anchor Bar. I think it's out of business now, right? Not sure, but
probably. There's no justice in the world. But you came to me and said, we should start a company because we have access to all this intellectual capital, I should say, like AKA there's all these smart people around and we have exceedingly low opportunity costs, right? Which was basically like I spent all my time playing World of Warcraft. I protest that. I remember you and I, Emmett, shared a World of Warcraft account. Yeah. And I think I put like 60 hours a week on it or something like that. It was actually not sharing. It was really, you playing on your account, but I was like putting in like a significant amount of time on it. But, you know, Matt came and was like, hey, we should start a company. And that's what really got us started on trying to figure out like startups, like should we start, you know, a company? And then we brought in like Matt and I looked at each other and we're like, okay, we want to start a company. We narrowed it down to an internet company because that was like a low CapEx company to start. Which was good because we had $0. But then the problem was that neither of us knew jack shit about how to make a internet company or website. So we had to recruit someone who knew how to program, and that was you.
This pattern, I feel like, repeats itself again also later with Justin TV, where we bring in Kyle for the same reason of like, we want to do this thing and none of us know how to do it. I guess we need another co-founder. And by co-founder, we mean person to do the work.
Exactly. We need a technical co-founder to do all the work.
That's it. That's always a good plan. I mean, if you could, it's nice. It's a good plan if you can execute it. My first memory of Matt is, I don't know if this is the first time I met him, but my first memory of Matt that's really strong is him playing Warcraft 3 and me like watching over his shoulder as he's playing Warcraft 3 in the dorm and like owning noobs and like climbing the ladder and like him telling me about hearing like watching Korean replays, which turned into like, that was my first introduction actually into
that was before Twitch,
into like watching gameplay. Yeah.
Wait, that was when you would upload the replay file, right? Like you would upload a file that would like contain the data of like who moved where and stuff, and then people would like load it in Warcraft and replay it and like watch it in the client.
Yeah. Well, Korea also actually had into Warcraft 3. We played 3v3 a lot. We did pretty well at 3v3.
Yeah.
Well, it was like YouTube wasn't even a thing then, right?
Yeah, but how did you find out about the replays? Like that's the part I didn't
Yeah.
understand, because like I just like played video games. It never occurred to me to try to get better by like watching replays. And like what how did you like come up with that?
I mean, eventually I managed to get on #1 on US West and US East, and just like when you play at that level, everyone's watching replays. I think there were even Korean TV channels which people took videos of as well, because Koreans actually had TV channels back then that streamed video games, and obviously the Koreans are always the best. So you want to study the Koreans in RTS, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you gave up your professional gaming career to work in finance.
Fong, I remember you telling me that it was on your first resume when you applied to Goldman that like you were like good at Warcraft 3.
Tell the story of how Warcraft 3, being #1 on the ladder in Warcraft 3, got you the job at Goldman.
Oh, this guy who interviewed me, Rich Rosenblum, yeah, he was like, all these finance resumes are really boring. They obviously get lots of really smart people at Goldman. And it was just like, yeah, everyone's like the same. This one's really interesting. Like, how do you think about like, how do you get so good at it? How does the game work? It kind of turned out it's kind of similar to investing and trading. So, yeah, that's how it got me the job.
Wait, you can't just say that. How is playing Warcraft 3 similar to trading?
I think it's probably more similar to macro investing in that, any RTS game is kind of like rock, paper, scissors, right? A very advanced version of rock, paper, scissors. And, it's about taking information, digesting it, coming up with different strategies. Yeah, I think investing is a lot like that, right? It's a dynamic game where the rules are always changing.
So well, like it was good enough. Rock when everyone's picking rock.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Okay, so that's the job. Like basically, Emmett and I we'd started this calendar company, and then instead of joining us at Y Combinator after we got in over the summer, you decided that you needed a visa to stay in America, and you were like, okay, I'm going to actually get a real job, which probably was the move in retrospect. Well, maybe if you looked in the short-term window after post-graduation, you looked a lot smarter than we did like 1 year after. But after that, fast forward, you went and like, let me take a pause there. Were there any other fun stories you remember? Like, what did you think of like our tech career in those early days?
I don't know. I really thought it was interesting what you guys were doing, for sure. I thought Justin TV was kind of like your dream come true. Like,
Finally, everyone's going to pay attention to me. Yes.
Finally.
I mean, you were ahead of your time, right? Like Snapchat.
Jamie, when did you first meet Fong?
When did I first meet Fong? It must have been on one of our trips to New York. Or like, maybe it was it must have been like when you were visiting out here at one point, but then we hung out a lot when I moved to New York in like 2012 or something like that.
I think it was probably when I went to the Broderick house, right?
Yeah, we had this house in Broderick and Fulton where Emmett and I lived. Did anyone
owned
else
by a slumlord?
Owned by a slumlord. It was like this pretty. It was actually like a reasonably
in the shower.
Yeah, I mean there was some shit.
The floor like kind of collapsing. The deck was at like a -10-degree angle.
That was our fault though. That was our fault. We threw. What's random is I was on a Zoom call yesterday with somebody who lived in that house after us, and randomly, and no, but he was friends with. So we lived in it. It was like pretty good rate actually for San Francisco. I think we were paying like $5,500 a month for like a 5-bedroom. Which turned out to be an amazing deal for San Francisco. We would throw these incredible Beta Breakers parties. And for people who don't know, Beta Breakers is this theoretically like a foot race in San Francisco, like a 12K or 12K, right? That's like the distance of the.
But mostly it's just a shit show.
Yeah, so it's basically a race that goes from the Bay, which is like the east side of San Francisco, all the way to the west side, the breakers, like to the ocean. And people run it actually, but most people, there's this huge amount of affiliated participants who just walk the trail afterwards, like getting progressively more and more drunk, starting at 7 a.m.
And they almost all give up about halfway in between, which is coincidentally where our house was.
Yeah, and they just spill out into the street in like a massive, like Mardi Gras or something like that. And we had a house that was 1 block off of the thing, and we would just throw this insane rages. We should cut a video. I have some videos saved in my favorites because I love showing them to people. We should cut a video of into the thing. So I mean, we progressively every year our house would get more and more fucked up, and because we lived in this with this let's say a negligent landlord, we would never get fixed. And so the balcony would, because of the weight of all the people that would come through the house, the balcony would like bowed in lower and lower and lower.
To be fair, at the same time, we once called to get because there's water leaking through the ceiling because the drain was clogged in one of the balconies, and there's water literally dripping through onto my bed and onto the couch. And the landlord sent people to repaint the ceiling.
Yeah, that's a bad move for them, because that's a problem for, we didn't own it,
no.
Yeah.
I could tell you guys were working hard because whenever I visited, I remember you guys were just never there. Yeah, you guys were just working on your startup, and there'd be some random other person there who I never met before.
Some roommate.
There was no soap or anything, so you guys were just work on Justin TV at the time, I think.
Yeah. Wait. So, Fong, I want to hear your first impression when you met me and Justin in college, or when you met Jamie. What did you think?
Justin always liked to poke fun at the fact I was Australian. I just really enjoyed our intellectual conversations, I think, like you, me, and Justin. Distinctly remember that in the dining hall. We played lots of 3v3 RTS. Justin, I think, what I remember the most about him is he just always liked to get stuff done. So, Yale, you obviously have a lot of smart people, but Justin would just have this random crazy ideas, and he'd just, you'd think it wouldn't happen, but somehow it would happen.
I love that that's what you remember about me, and not that I just get stupid drunk and pass out in the living room or on the floor or in the courtyard. And speaking of stuff that that we used to get done, I remember that there was when the senior year when we were going to do our everybody goes to Myrtle Beach for the week or whatever when you're seniors, and I was like, we're going to have Jello wrestling. Remember that?
I remember
everybody was like, why? One, we don't want to. We don't want to. We don't nobody wants this. What's, and I think I had seen it in a movie or we weren't cool. We weren't cool at all. We were just RTS playing nerds or something. But I was obsessed with this idea that we were going to have a Jello wrestling and film it into a home video, for our Myrtle Beach trip as seniors. And I made everyone, we had 30 people in this house, and I made everyone had this assembly line of unboxing Jello and making Jello. You have to heat up boiling pots of water in this rental house that was totally fucking derelict, by the way. It had rotting meat in the yard. I don't even know where the meat came from, but when we got there to this rental vacation house with the type of place that allows 30 people to stay in one Airbnb. There was no Airbnb, but it was into one rental, is not a quality place, right? They know who their audience is, which is
I remember
college kids.
I remember when you were doing this that it broke the refrigerator almost.
So
could not.
It actually did physically break the fridge. Yeah, we put all these boiling pots of Jello into every container that we could find and put them into the fridge. And the fridge it was overheated the fridge and broke the fridge. That's it. The fridge was cooling the Jello for 6 days, so that on the 7th, the final day, we could have Jello wrestling. And then I finally, had the Jello. We put it out in this disgusting tarp or whatever, and then nobody would do it.
Kiddie pool.
It was a kiddie pool. That's right. It was a kiddie pool. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go, I'll do it. I'll wrestle our friend Nick Nolte. His name's not Nick Nolte, but just the guy in order to get it started.
Speaking of Myrtle Beach vacations, I'm in Miami now. Jamie, you were just in Miami. We missed each other like ships passing.
Wait, Fong, were you in Miami?
No, I wasn't in Miami. No.
Like ships
Well,
in the night.
You have to come. Everyone has to come do Miami. What did you think of Miami?
Emmett, are you moving? Emmett, are you moving to Miami?
Absolutely not. But maybe I'd come back. I'm just not gonna live here. It's so hot. Like I don't know if you've been to Miami, but Miami in the summer, it's May and it's already really hot. And I don't do that well in like hot weather. I would like die here in the summer. This is not a place I could live like year round.
If it wasn't hot, would you consider living there?
Like if Miami had LA's weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd consider it. Like being able to just go swimming is amazing. Like I love the like Art Deco architecture. I like the like it's like my aesthetic sense. Like I love the flamboyant shit. Like not like the Lambos, but the like all the like the hotel we're staying in has a really cool tile floor. Like this shirt I'm wearing, this like
Art Deco. I didn't. We've been friends for like 30 years, and I've never known that. I don't think of when I think of Art Deco, I don't think Emmett Shear.
It's my favorite shit. It's the architecture of the future, and it has been for at least 60 years.
You should have rented a Lambo though while you were there to fully participate in the culture.
That's true. There's parts of the Miami culture I find distasteful, but I think overall it's really cool.
Is this whole like it seems like it's a vibe? I mean, half the people I know in my social network were texting me from Miami last weekend. Like, what was going on? Is there like some sort of
I missed that
party or something or like?
Oh, I was there. So I think what happened is basically that there's a lot of people have been talking about Miami. I guess most notably Keith Boy, who kind of kicked off this whole Miami trend, right? So. Or VCs, or I guess tech people moving to Miami. And so I think a bunch of people have been interested from seeing this kind of all over Twitter. And then it just turned out that there was like a semi-critical mass of people who were going last week. And then everyone who wanted to go check out Miami was like, well, I might as well go this week because that's when everyone else is there. So I think it was interesting. And it was actually really cool to be able to see a bunch of people in person, because obviously we've mostly been locked inside and not seeing people in person for a really long time. But I think it was still a lot of people who lived in San Francisco, and it probably wasn't necessarily the best week to check out Miami for what Miami actually is, because we actually just ended up, going to a bunch of house parties and the beach, and it's not really like a picture of what the week to week life in Miami would be like, which is probably like less Miami Beach and more like actual Miami for most people. But it was cool to see.
Were you going to try to see if you want to live there or just to visit or what?
I wasn't going to see if I wasn't going to see if I wanted to live there. I think I just wanted to visit and see kind of who was there tech wise, maybe meet some interesting founders, maybe just, chat with people I haven't seen in a while, that kind of thing.
Did you find any founders?
Yeah, we chatted with a few actually, chatted with a founder who had been living in Miami for a while. It was originally from Chicago. Few people from kind of like the Midwest or like the East Coast who have kind of gravitated to Miami a little bit. So I think there's definitely some of that going on. It's just like hard to measure in like an environment like last week when it's just a whole bunch of people visiting.
But
people seem to be really excited.
Were in crypto?
Yeah.
What percentage of those tech founders were in crypto?
This guy wasn't in crypto.
Wait, seriously? Because I've met a bunch of tech people here, but they are 100% crypto people. I
actually didn't meet anybody who was doing crypto stuff that was like a founder. So yeah.
Well, I'm surprised, and that's a really positive sign for Miami, I think. Like, I'm not anti-crypto. I'm just saying, like, if it's all crypto people, it's a different vibe than like if it's more diverse.
I'm coming around to crypto in that before I was saying like I don't understand what the point of this technology is, but I've come around now in the last couple of years, but especially in the last couple of months, I'm like, okay, there's like real use cases. It's a way to
like tax evasion.
No. See that like people are saying there's crypto like that. It's the exact same pattern with the web. I remember someone pointed this out to me. Actually, my friend Balaji pointed this out to me like 15 years ago. It's like when you and I pitched Y Combinator on making a the calendar app, like the Kiko, and saying there's going to be a web apps are the future. The argument is like, the argument from traditional like technologists is like, oh, well, you can do all this. It's so much more inefficient than a desktop app, right? But then there were all of these other things that it unlocked, right? And with crypto, there's like a couple things that it unlocks that, crypto applications can unlock these like truly trustless, distributed applications with vastly decentralized ownership and incentives that we haven't been able to have with like Web2 apps. And I actually think that there are some really interesting potential use cases, and you just pay for that at the cost of like this, horrible computation, burden. But it can be worth it for certain things, and I've come around.
I think people like overemphasize the computation burden aspect of it because it's like, well, how much does it cost to run like a whole bunch of banks and all the land required for all of this stuff, and it's hard to quantify and be like, okay, well, this is like worth it versus like something else. But I think it's like a little bit exaggerated.
So Emmett, you and I are now the old like has-beens who are railing against new technology.
Totally. No, I really fully embraced my position
from Florida
as the from Florida as the man who I understood this stuff before, but now all the new stuff is threatening and scary and just really nonsense. And the people doing it are just a big scam. And eventually they're going to get found out. Like, I can see the pattern. I look just like people saying this about like internet companies. Like, it's clearly like there's something there. I don't think it's a zero.
I think there's a difference between pattern matching though and thinking from first principles. So, I think what's interesting is now with Twitter, people have these ideas of how different things happen, and that debate happens much more quickly. I think people have put out that, it's like internet in the early days with crypto. I think if you think from first principles, for certain use cases, it makes sense. Like store of value, you want that to be decentralized. Doesn't make sense to be owned by a company, right? So digital gold, Bitcoin makes sense to me. Art and collectibles make sense to me. That also probably shouldn't be owned by a company. And then the real question is for these other use cases, does the increased computational cost actually make the experience better? I think a lot of people are relying on that.
Is it a tax worth paying?
Yeah, is it a tax worth paying? And I think in certain use cases, probably not. Like I'd imagine like really high fidelity gaming, probably not. For things where speed doesn't matter, maybe the decentralized aspect makes it better. Depends though, right? Like a lot of people actually do want centralized things. Like you want to be able to call up someone when something's broken. So I think outside of collectibles, art, and store value, it kind of depends if the computation is worth it and whether you want centralized versus decentralized.
How big do you think like that is? I mean those are three things. Those are big potentially. Like how big are those three things together?
Well, gold's $10 trillion asset, and then if you take the total value of art and collectibles, it's about $2 trillion. So I think Ethereum is gunning for the second, and Bitcoin's gunning for the first, obviously. And then we talked about before video games. Potentially that could be something. I think the thing you'd have to get over there is the computational cost, right, and the user experience. I could see the idea of having a decentralized game appealing to gamers for sure, but I don't know if the experience, people like good graphics. So
the thing that's interesting to me of crypto right now is like the decentralized. They basically using it as a way to change invert the economics for some of these Web2 platforms. And so, one example is my friend has this company called Brain Trust that is it's like Upwork or kind of like a freelancer platform. And what's interesting about that is basically they use the crypto economics, the tokenomics or whatever, to distribute the value of the platform to all the people who are freelancers participating on it. And they actually pay them. They get some share of revenue for onboarding customers. So instead of a traditional sales force going out there to like Goldman's, like you need to hire programmers, you should hire them, on Braintrust. They have, their freelancers can onboard the clients, right? The Fortune 500s or other businesses, and they can get a share of revenue of like what the GMV that those people push through the platform. And so what's interesting is that it's just entirely, it's like they've been able to, it's almost like employee equities. It was a huge unlock for Silicon Valley, right? Where you say like, oh, there's, instead of me being the entire owner of this company and then like you all work for me, I'm going to make you guys some smaller owners, and then you are incentivized to work a lot harder and innovate within this company, et cetera. And this is just extending that to like a much larger pool of people in a way that's, it's impractical to do equity for if you're like not, Facebook or Google, And I think that's a huge innovation.
Do you need a cryptocurrency for that? I mean, you could do that with, normal equity, right?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, on the normal equity part, it's a lot more overhead, like legal overhead. The second is that there's a question of like how much trust will people put in a centralized body, and yes, so there is the need for that's like probably variable. It's like not necessarily, it could be the case that you could do it with equity. And then the third is that with a token, you can create immediate liquidity for it so people can see the real value in it. And I think that actually is important, because when you ask people to work for equity, it's a lot different than saying, okay, we're going to give you, I think they call their thing like beach trust tokens or something like that. I don't know. We give you some token, and then you can immediately, we're immediately making a market for it, and you can like sell it, And so
is the token a claim on future revenue that goes through the platform or something?
No, but the token, but I think it's a limited supply token. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But then they're some of the payment that goes through the platform. So they take zero fees on the platform. That's the other thing that's interesting is like it's a market where the traditional players like Upwork or something take like pretty high fees, but like that matters to you as like a freelancer, right? Like what your fees are, it's like you're pretty sensitive to that. So they take zero fees, but some percentage of the payment goes into, I think, market orders that buy the token back to immediately create like this liquidity cycle in the token.
I see. It's not dividends, it's stock buybacks effectively. But like,
yes,
that's whatever, same idea.
But
there's a reason to own that there's money that's definitely going in for demand, like back to token holders at some point.
Yes. Yeah.
Assuming the system works.
Right. Assuming the system works, there's money going back to token holders. Now it's early days they think they launched sub 1 year ago. So it's pretty early days, but they are doing, I think it's like one of the bigger non-DeFi crypto apps. And what's cool about it is, to me, like the crypto stuff is like kind of incidental, but it's it's the technology that enables that inversion of the economics of the platform, of a traditional platform.
What it reminds me of is that like you could have made Uber a lot before Uber existed. Like I would have been great, at least in San Francisco, it would have been great to just like text and get a car. Even if you didn't have like the Uber app, it would have actually worked pretty good. Like I really would have, like Twitter launched with text messaging. Like it probably would have been pretty good to just like use Uber from a from a feature phone if you had to, but it wasn't until you could actually like imagine the right experience that became like the default thing that people thought to do the innovation. And I do think one of the things that crypto has done is really pushed this like decentralized organization idea into the public consciousness. And people are like, basically, it's caused a bunch of experimentation. There's like tons of capital available to do whatever experiment with that kind of thing you want, which might be like irrational, except that there actually might be a lot of stuff there. Kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy of like WeWork or something. Like you get enough capital, maybe it is a good idea.
Well, I think it's also part of this political movement or social movement towards eat the establishment, right? So I think in and of itself, even if the unit economics doesn't make sense, they might make sense from a user acquisition standpoint just because people believe it. So your user acquisition cost is essentially free,
So why does, I get Justin with the brain thing, and I kind of understand Bitcoin. Why does anyone buy Dogecoin? or Dogecoin. I've never actually been totally sure
I think
about
it's
that.
Dogecoin.
it's Dogecoin. It's Dogecoin. I don't know. Matt probably has
Dogecoin.
to comment on that. What's like with all these hype stock or meme stocks and meme cryptos?
So I think if you talk to traditional smart investors, right? Like I think Charlie Munger just commented on this at the Berkshire annual meeting. He said it was like rat poison. I think a lot of the boomer investors, don't actually fully understand, what's going on. I actually think, social media, same way it's affected politics, right? Like you have Trump basically because of Twitter, right? You have a lot of these different political movements around the world because of Twitter, wokeism as well, or I think social media is here to stay as an impact on markets. I just think there are very nuanced different things. So like Dogecoin, I think is like it's like a joke meme. Like people kind of buy it as a joke, right? Like I don't think anyone who actually buys Dogecoin thinks it's intrinsically worth, whatever it's worth now, $80+ billion. So I think you have a bunch of that joke memes, and then in some cases in penny stocks you do have people trying to pump and dump stocks kind of on the unsuspecting public. But I think Dogecoin kind of fits in this joke meme theme, along with GameStop, which I think kind of is like this political protest thing, right?
But like, what's the market cap of Dogecoin?
80 billion.
Like,
Billion.
yeah,
Oh.
I'm struggling to follow that as like it's like just a joke, man.
With Dogecoin, a lot of it has to be just like people speculating, right? It's like, oh, this thing went up 10x and then it looks like it's going up more and Elon's talking about it, so I guess I should buy like a little bit, so when it goes up another 10x I can make some money. It's like going to Vegas when you can't go to Vegas.
So is
So at some point it's just
what's
going to
a
pop
bubble?
and it's literally going to go. It's literally just a bubble for no reason. It's an $80 billion bubble that's going to go to effectively zero.
well,
That's the
it's not really
thesis.
any different. It's not really different than GameStop or Hertz, right? Like you just have a bunch of like internet hype driving
But
it up.
GameStop had like a huge number of short sellers, which means it's actually part of what happens. You have this short squeeze going on, right? There's no short squeeze in Dogecoin. It's just people buying this thing and the price goes up.
I think it's like this. I think it's definitely a bubble. I think there's a difference though between like, say, Dogecoin and SPACs, for example. SPACs, I think, in a lot of cases, the people promoting them are trying to mislead the public. I think with Dogecoin and GameStop, it's kind of like a collective meme that's a bubble and non-economic, but it's kind of a joke meme, if that makes sense. The intentions are different. The outcome might be the same, but the intentions, I think, are different.
But do you think SPACs are just so as a kind of pivot? Do you think SPACs are just as much of a bubble as Dogecoin and are about the bottom's about to fall out? Like you have everyone I know seems to be a SPAC sponsor of something now. Like are all these people like fraudsters trying to mislead? No, I'm not a sponsor. I'm on the board of a SPAC.
That's right.
Yes, just but it's for what it's worth, it's like one I believe in. But my question is for you is like, do you think that this like the vast majority of these SPACs are like just trying to shill worthless garbage to the public to get the promote?
So I think SPACs aren't inherently bad in and of themselves. Like we've actually invested in a SPAC a long time ago, many years ago. That was a Brecken SPAC. Nomad Foods actually was a pretty good, well-run company. I think in the current environment, because of the day trading euphoria, people being locked down and just wanting to gamble on their phones, a lot of day traders are trying to play the SPAC pop. And so that's kind of attracted a lot of people who can raise lots of money. I think it's mainly, right now, the incentives are not great. So you have a negative selection bias in terms of the quality of the companies that are getting SPAC'd.
So it might be that there's some that are fine, but like there's a, it's a warning sign. I
mean, I think a lot of these companies are pretty overvalued. Yeah. And in some cases fraudulent or whatever. It's like any bubble, right? Like people doing SPACs, 5-10 years ago, no one wanted to do it. then everyone wants to do it. All the imitators come in because they see all the money you can make in a very short period of time, and that tends to attract lower quality people. And that's kind of the state of affairs we're in now. Yeah.
So, okay, if you're not investing in SPACs, like what do you think? Like I guess
You're not investing in Dogecoin.
If you're not investing in SPACs, you're not investing in Dogecoin.
What do you even do these days?
What should people be investing in the the Dow's like 3,400 or 34,000. Like we're full pandemic recovery, money printing press flying. What should people be doing? For what it's worth, for the context, Matt is now a professional. He took his Goldman career and went on to become a successful professional investor, working at such illustrious funds as Soros and now his own fund. Have you announced that yet? Is that a secret? Your own fund?
It's public, yeah. So I left Soros and now I'm starting my own fund. Yeah. Selden Capital from the Foundation series. So our goal is to basically invest in companies or industries that we think are at the bottleneck of progress, and then we short frauds and overhyped fads, kind of in
SPACs and Dogecoin.
We don't short things like Dogecoin because I don't think you want to bet against things that you cannot predict.
Okay, so what should people
never bet against Elon Musk's Twitter account?
Exactly.
I think it's actually pretty hard to find undervalued assets right now. If you're a short seller, then SPACs is actually a pretty fertile ground. I think a decent number of them will turn out to not be very good businesses, and in some cases frauds. Asset valuation is pretty high right now.
To put it all into Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Just YOLO crypto. That's the only way to do it.
Crypto. I feel like
that's our
Bitcoin
official
and
group
Ethereum.
advice.
Oh yes, we don't have any official advice. This is not investment advice. You should definitely not listen to us. We're not professional
YOLO
investors.
100% crypto.
That was Apology's advice.
I should make my official statement, which is none of this constitutes official investment advice.
That's an important statement.
But what should you? Okay, here actually, just I'm for my own curiosity because as somebody who's like doesn't, as a VC investing is completely different, right? Like seed stage investing is completely different because you're just investing in people and then you're praying to God, right? That's the process, and you have no choice after you invest. So there's no like exit timing or anything like that. It's a lot of prayer. For investing in like the kind of macro investing that you're doing in an asset heavy, like asset rich environment, or when assets are super expensive, like what do? Do people hold cash or gold or Bitcoin, or I don't know, what are people supposed to do?
I think most people should just index invest, right? Buy and hold forever and not try and time the market. I think from a business or asset class perspective, the areas I think are kind of interesting are basically like physical sectors. So, in the past decade, we've been investing primarily in tech, software, internet, and so forth. But markets move in cycles, and once something gets really popular, people invest a lot of capital, and then you get a bunch of supply, and valuations go up, and then the returns aren't as good. Mining materials, things that we need to actually build all these electric cars that have raised, something like 20 plus electric vehicle companies have raised money. They all need to go out and buy materials to build those cars, right? Like copper, nickel. And, we haven't funded huge deposits of those kind of materials in a long period of time. Takes like 3+ years to bring that capacity online. I think the physical sectors that we'll need for all this Green New Deal spending and infrastructure that's going to happen around the world, that, no venture capitalist has really funded.
Wait, but so the one thing I was thinking is like that stuff, everything you're talking about, Matt, like is different from software in that basically you don't need to go to any particular program to learn how to program. Like I did take a CS program to like learn how to, like in college, but I knew how to program before I entered that. And like, I'm pretty sure I could have taught myself learn how to program without it if necessary. And like, Justin, you learned how to program and you didn't really like take formal education on it. but I think like all the, like, if you want to go like build lithium ion batteries, you need like an actual like engineering education. It is not as, you can't just do the like, I'll just sort of YOLO this, like I'm just gonna like learn how to program on the fly. And if I like write bad software, I'll like lose my customers' data, but like nothing that bad will happen. Like you can't like, you make a bad like hardware stuff, it like catches on fire and kills people. Like it's like not okay to just like fuck around with that. And I feel like, so one thing we've been talking about a lot in the group is like the changes to the math framework and like STEM education and like those changes. And I'm curious, like, how important do you think it is? Like, is this going to require us to have a whole like new set of people trained in like engineering and the physical sciences? And are we prepared to do that? Or like, no, it's okay. We don't really need that many more people anyway. It's like, it's just capital intensive.
Well, I think in areas like semiconductor manufacturing, we definitely need a lot more STEM grads. Over half the world, semiconductor manufacturing is done by, Taiwanese, Japanese, or Korean companies. And America's kind of lost that battle a long time ago. Europe just said recently they want to prioritize it and bring it back. I think that's going to be a multi-decade process. Because you need, like you said, the US has the best, I'd say, top engineers, but there's this whole kind of upper middle layer of engineers that we need that, we just don't have. And I think when Obama famously asked, I think, Steve Jobs, how do we bring those jobs back to the US to make the iPhones? And he's like, they're not coming back. And, I think Steve Jobs' view was for the most part correct. If we want to change that, that's going to be at least a decade or two before it really changes.
That seems to be like one of the most fundamental problems that we have in America, to me, is that our pipeline of STEM graduates is vastly diminished from well, maybe not vastly diminished. I would say other countries have accelerated far, far beyond us. I think we're like, there's a stat that I had pulled up about this. So like 4.7 in 2016, China's graduated 4.7 million STEM graduates, and in the U.S., we in the same year we graduated 568,000. Now, obviously, China's has a four times bigger population, but even still, that's like 50%, less than 50%.
Yeah, and there's this accelerating like crazy too. It's like if you look at the chart of STEM grads by country, China's graph looks like a startup that you want to invest in. And the US is just kind of like flat. We're slowly growing basically. US is like a legacy business and China's like a startup in terms of like the growth rate of, the China graph looks like this and then it's like a hockey stick, so that's, mildly terrifying for us.
So what's the solution? Like, how
whenever
do you
see that though?
Yeah.
Wait. Well, whenever you see that, I think the alarm bell goes off in my head from many, many years of running a big operational company, which is you make what you measure. And I bet you somebody in the Chinese government is gold on increasing more STEM grads. And if you put me in charge of that and you made my like livelihood and bonus rely on making the count of STEM grads go up, most of my ways of going about that don't involve things that produce lots of scientific progress for the next 10 years. Like I don't know where mine goes to, but it's always cheating the metric, right? That's the fastest way to, you want to 10x the number of STEM grads in 5 years. Like, well, reduce make it easier, funnel people into it, force people who aren't really that interested to take that instead of something else. And I guess I believe that the cart of civilization is pulled by the free. You can't force people into being creative or inventing shit.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much that China's forcing it though, as much as like they're just an emergent developing economy, or a rapidly emergent developing economy from, I guess, what they were like 30 years ago. So I guess it's a little bit hard to say, but I don't have any concrete data. I do think like the idea of you make what you measure is interesting though. And if China's, measuring more STEM grads, and we're measuring, you know, how do we make sure that everyone progresses in math equally throughout the grades and nobody gets ahead of anyone else, then, well, it seems like we're screwed.
Well, that's certainly not a good idea.
Well, so that refers to the tweet, right? There was a tweet about the California Department of Education's 2021 mathematics framework, which
Proposal
basically attacks the idea of gifted students and you know, said that we're no longer going to group students by ability, and we're going to change, you know, algebra and calculus, algebra for 8th graders, calculus for high schoolers. We're going to change how we enable people to take those classes. Was that right?
I mean, it was a little bit hard. I read through it. The document was a little bit self-contradictory in places, so it's a little bit hard to say what it's actually saying. But what it seems like it's saying is that at least through 8th grade, but it looks like through 10th grade, they basically want to standardize math education so everybody's in the same class regardless of ability, which would result in basically 9th graders taking algebra 1 in 9th grade, and then geometry in 10th grade, and then there would be a bunch of electives after 10th grade where they could take, you know, pre-calculus or trigonometry or you know, calculus or something like that. But I don't really see how you're going to have someone doing algebra 1 in 9th grade and then taking calculus as a senior, given that I think I took calculus as a senior and I did algebra 1 in like 6th or 7th grade. So yeah, it just doesn't seem like a good trend.
What is the goal here for the Department of Education? Like, what do we think?
I think the self-stated
fairness.
goal is equity and fairness. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone,
I
it's
think
like
the
unfair
goal
to
is for whoever's on the board to keep their seats, I think, right?
I think that's too like cynical. I actually think they really believe this is a way to drive fairness, and the goal is, you know, to play devil's advocate, like be in favor of this. Like tracking has been shown to like lead to basically harm the kids who get left behind, which is true a lot of the time, because there's sort of this sorting thing that happens where like the most like intellectually curious or like interested kids who are like the most interested in being in the classroom and doing the work get sorted out into the more advanced classes. And then you have these classes full of like on average kids who are less interested in academics, and those classrooms become like self-fulfillingly not fun to be in, and not like intellectually rewarding to be in. I think that's true probably, but the downside is that, I don't know, I remember, so we went from tracked math like to, we get to progress at our own rate. Justin and I went to middle school together. And I still remember the difference in speed between learning math in lockstep with every other kid and learning math at the pace I could go on my own, like a personalized learning thing, where they almost set up this competition to see who could like learn the most math the fastest. And
yeah, we were crushing it.
We went, it was like 5x faster learning speed than learning in lockstep with other people. And what's interesting is I wasn't like I was in lockstep with Justin in some advanced tracked class. They just like didn't have the resources to pay attention to us. So they put us in the corner and gave us a stack of problem sheets and said, go at it. And like, that actually worked for me. I don't know if that worked for everyone, but that worked really well for me. That was exactly what I needed. And I just remember the horror of being put in, I guess it was 7th grade or 8th grade, back in a lockstep geometry class, which is specifically what they're suggesting here. And it was just
For
the
10th
worst.
graders.
Yeah, to 10th graders, but so this was like an 8th grade for us. And it was the worst year of math. It was just so painful to be like in the same after the freedom of getting to learn at my own pace, being forced into a lockstep learning that was like at the same rate of problems as everyone else was just, I don't know if Justin, you remember that too. That was just horrible. Like I really didn't like that.
So, I mean, I guess it's a question of whether you are creating an environment that promotes the like highest potential for the, you know, kind of best and brightest, or, you know, kind of doing whatever you can possible to like not leave behind the like people who might be at the bottom end of the bell curve in public school.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, that's the trade-off.
Although I
Because
think,
if you want to put, sorry, go
I
ahead.
think although most of the data shows that putting people with similar skill levels together helps them learn better. Because, you know,
including at the bottom end.
including at the bottom end. Yep.
It tends to increase the gap. Maybe you're right. Maybe it lifts all the boats, but like, it definitely helps the people at the top more than the people at the bottom. And so the gap,
I think that's
like,
right.
the tracking absolutely increases the gap, and thus reduces equity. Reduces the ultimate outcome is like lower equity between people. I don't think kneecapping the kids who are doing like advanced work is like the way to fix that problem. Like, maybe we should just invest more resources in making sure we get more individualized education for everybody. But I think not facing that there's a trade-off is like wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of the problems with like a lot of the education stuff is I guess not only the kneecapping, I guess you could say, but also just the complete lack of desire to pay attention to the data of things that are shown to have worked well. So, for example, in New York, Success Academy, which is like one of the, I guess, preeminent charter schools in the U.S., like Success Academy just happens to be in New York, and they're a nonprofit, has shown amazing success in charter schools, like actually operating in the same, sometimes even in the same buildings as like other public schools that are doing much worse, with the same distribution of students based on like ethnicity and so on. And obviously there's some selection bias with like the actual application process of like someone had the desire to send their kid to a better school and they went through applying and they showed up and like all this different kind of stuff. And there's some selection bias there, but like these schools are doing amazingly well teaching the same demographics that are like failing in schools in the same buildings. And instead of like paying attention and trying to learn from these charter schools or like, you know, examples of things that are being successful, it's like the Department of Education in New York and some of these other places, it's like trying to shut them out as much as possible because they're in competition with the teachers union, because the public schools are getting funded by the number of students that are going to them. So students are going to charters, it takes revenue away from the public schools. The whole system ends up being kind of a mess for a lot of these reasons.
I feel like the same, like America spends a ton of money on education. It's a huge amount of money. And it's not clear that like doing more education results in a more educated populace. And so like, I guess the heretical thought would be to go the other direction and to say like, because actually, well, I hated that algebra class and that lockstep class, and I'm against it on the basis of human freedom. I don't know that it actually harmed me. I don't know that I was like dumber as a result, really. And like,
that's just anecdotal evidence. Jamie is saying that we have like evidence from charter schools that are like that.
But we definitely have evidence we can alter your school, your grades during the program. Just like we have evidence that we can put you in programs where you exercise more and your like time to run a mile goes down. It's just that once you exit the program, you revert back to whatever you were doing that when you're not in the program, and there's no long-term residual effect, that it doesn't matter, and actually it's fine. Like almost all the real important learning happens in a self-directed way, and we can just like chillax about it. The same way, like with medicine, a lot of the end of life care we do is actually kind of meaningless. It doesn't work. Like, it doesn't actually do anything other than assuage our guilt for not. And I don't know if I 100% believe this, but I think that it should be said that we spend a lot of money doing a lot of education, and it's not obvious that it's that much. Like graduating high school used to be exceptional. Now graduating from like increasingly people have to get master's degrees to be part of the like, educational elite. And it just seems like a Red Queen's race forever.
Well, I agree with you that spending more money doesn't necessarily result in better outcomes. The US spends, I think, second or third highest of any OECD country per capita of public student. But I think the Success Academy Jamie brought up, I think, is a good example. Like if you measure, on just reading ability, the rate which Success Academy converts is much higher. I think even if you adjust for selection bias. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily how much we spend. I think it's Success Academy. I don't think spends materially more than the current system. I think it's just the incentives and how we spend that money.
I think they actually spend less. So
yeah, they actually spend less. Yeah,
they're spending less and getting better outcomes. So, I mean, at least you could spend less in that way, like by just copying whatever they're doing. And then regardless of whether the outcomes are better, which I mean, and then people would argue, well, are the outcomes actually better? I mean, they have better standardized testing scores. Some people have a problem with that. They send, a higher percentage of students to college, but not like, it's not actually like that massive of a difference once you get to that level. But like, hopefully if people are doing better in standardized testing in high school and you have a much higher graduation rate, you're preparing people better for the real world, especially if you're doing that at a lower cost. It seems like we should be learning some of these lessons, and instead, I guess to go back to like the original thing we're talking about, it's like disappointing to, instead of being focused on how we improve education for people who have like the least number of opportunities, we're focused on like, how do we remove opportunities from other smart kids so we make everybody equal, is just like the wrong focus, especially when you have like China, who doesn't give a shit about this at all. And they're just like educating people as fast as they can to be as smart as they can and go to STEM, so that they can kind of develop their own technology economy. It's a good way for us to fall behind.
I guess that the one thing you said there that I like is so I read this book, I think it's called The Cult of Smart, that's like about sort of questioning this thing, and it put the idea in my head. And like, what if increasing people's standardized test scores and like their achievement in school and all their academic achievement has way less impact than we think on like how successful they are later down the road, and that it's mostly all this kind of charade that like is all about sorting people, labeling them, but doesn't actually like create much in the way of actual downstream value, actual value.
Well,
and
I think
when I thought about that, I just want to finish the thought for a second. Is it like,
yeah,
what made me, when I read this book that was making that argument, I was like, wait a second, have I ever actually seen any evidence where someone's actually shown we improved the education, and then look like downstream at all these like rate of Nobel Prizes per capita or whatever went up? I mean, that's obviously not the right way to do it, but like, you get the idea. Is anyone ever actually shown the proactive case that like it's actually a good idea to spend this money? And I was like, I don't know that I've seen that. I don't know the evidence that like schooling works.
So I think it would be good to see that, but I think to like what we were saying before, it's like if you need chemical engineers, like they're going to have to be able to do chemistry, and if you're going to do chemistry, you have to be able to do math. And if you can't do math, you can't do chemistry. So like, it seems kind of self-evident at some point that you're at least going to need a higher percentage of people who have higher math test scores to be able to produce the engineers you need to produce like the batteries or the, technology economy. But I agree, it would be great to see like more of a study that proved it, I guess.
Like, one of the smartest guys I ever met was Aaron Swartz. And he was like unschooled at home. Like he didn't, and it wasn't like homeschooling where he was like in classes. They like basically let him do whatever he wanted, and he didn't have any trouble doing math. And so I just like, I've always wondered, what if we just like, that would be an experiment to run. What if you just like eliminated all the schooling spending and we're like, here, have the money back, please educate your children, bye. What would actually happen? And like, I'm not necessarily proposing we actually do, it's like a thought experiment, but how much would you bet that the unschooling environment would actually significantly underperform for like real world outcomes for those kids versus the schooled environment?
I mean, I think that's a good argument.
No, Aaron is an exception. He's coming from a very privileged background. Like his parents were like were smart, right? Like really educated, and like probably created a very good learning environment for him. I think that's, if you think of the average American, that's like not necessarily going to be the case. And it's also, I think school provides there's an educational component, but there's also like a socialization component and a structure component that is provided for a lot of people who don't like necessarily get as much of that at home.
I think the non-schooling strategy might work for brilliant people. Most of the brilliant people I know are kind of self-taught, but I don't think that works for the average person.
I wonder what people would actually do, though. Do you think they'd actually let like kids just do whatever? Do you think they'd like try to find?
They would put their kid in front of their iPhone. It's like what they've done in the last year. They would spend 2 weeks during the pandemic, they spend 2 weeks trying to like make lesson plans and stuff, realize that they don't have time for that or energy, and go back to like doing their job, and then put their kid in front of an iPad watching YouTube videos.
We spend like $12K a year per child. You got 2 kids, we can give you $24K a year in subsidy to like educate your children. You think they couldn't figure it out for that much?
They'd spend $24K on a new car or Gucci bag or whatever.
I just have more. I have more faith in the American public than that.
You could spend $2,000 to send your kid to China.
You have more. The people just spent their stimulus checks on Dogecoin and
GameStop.
Some of them did. Some of them did. Some of them did. Not all of them, though. I don't know. I guess I think is the really key question about schooling for me is like the freedom question, because it's like, do we trust people to know what's best for their children? Do we trust people to know how to spend their money? Do we know trust people, or do we think that like some elite group of people designing public school systems can educate other people's children better than they know how to do themselves? And like, I actually think there's this.
Oh, I'm with you on the same page.
I'm pro school choice, but if you do it in the form of coupons, I think that works. But I think if you just give them cash, that is, that might not be spent on education, I'm not sure people would spend it.
I think it's a different question when you say it's like, is it a choice to pull your kid out of school and then get your money back or get a subsidy back to like educate them? That's great. But if you're saying to abolish the public school system and have everybody be forced to do that.
Totally. I'm not saying having a public option for schools. Outcomes. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, because there's a selection bias of the people who would actually care enough to like say, okay, I'm going to educate my child the way I want. Those people, those kids, it's a pool of people who are probably going to have better outcomes anyways.
Right, having a public option. Yeah, totally. If you have a public people like don't want to figure out how to educate their kids, having a default option for like, here, just like sign here, send your kid there, we'll educate them. That's like very straightforward and default is good, because like maybe they don't want to think about that problem. Like people have different things that they're like focused on in their life, but like fundamentally that's not the way it works right now. And there's no way to say, I think I could do a better job. I want the money back, and I want my kid back, and I'm gonna figure this out. And I think we should trust people to make that choice.
I agree with you there. I agree for sure. You should be able to get the money back and educate your kid yourself. I just think that like a very small percentage of the population will take that option. You're like sub 1% of people would take that option, and that would it probably would be really great for the students who are, those students.
Given how much money it is, I think you're wrong. I think the amount of money we spend on education is quite high, and I bet it would be 25% or more of people would say, give me the money. It's a lot of money. It's enough money that one parent could quit their job. For most families.
I wish we could test that. That would be amazing. I mean,
the laboratory of the states, man. The laboratory of the states.
We need a state.
The federal system.
Yeah, I mean, charter schools are kind of like that. Not quite, but
school choice and charter schools. It's a half step.
Yeah, I'm in favor of charter schools for that reason, but it's still the same kind of like that gives you freedom on the production side, but not on the like consumer side.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think we should just give people coupons or, money they can spend on education, and if they want to put it in Lambda school or, the local charter school, whatever, like, do as they please. Let the free market do its thing. Just subsidize the money that goes into it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I think a lot of people would look at that and say that's like kind of socialist because we're like subsidizing everyone, like a massive demand subsidy. But on the other hand, it's very capitalist because it's like freedom, like buy whatever you want. You choose while you do this thing. So I think that whole dichotomy ends up being kind of stupid.
It's like basic income, right? Like you're
creating
a market. You're creating a market.
Yeah.
Even though you're creating a subsidy, but you're also creating a market with the subsidy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge difference.
Okay. Any final thoughts on this topic?
Right. I think we'll see this. I think, we talked about the US. I think we'll see different results in different states. And that's the beauty of America, right? So, California makes a mistake. Maybe people go to Texas. I don't know. That's why people have been living California, different states, different policies.
But we're all staying in California. despite the fact that we all universally want to vote, you know, like have
this standard. This is our standard MO, right? Bitch about it and then don't do anything. It's like really important to like, get good at that. Because you're doing a lot of that through your life.
Well, if you're lazy, it turns out moving your entire life is a lot of work. So
totally.
Would you? Okay, actually, final question on this: would you send your kids to California public school?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, probably not.
Emmett,
I think depends on which public school. I've not exhaustively researched the public schools. I think there's unfortunately a lot of public schools I probably wouldn't be comfortable sending my kids to in California, but I think it depends on the school. I've heard there's some really good ones too. Yeah, I don't have kids yet, so I'm less educated.
You're less invested. You're like,
well, we're talking about 5 years from now, I guess, for me. So the trend is not, and in San Francisco specifically. So the trend is not looking good. Maybe somewhere else in California probably has better schools than the Bay Area, and I would definitely send my kids there if it was a good school, but not in San Francisco, no way.
And I concur. I don't think I would. Maybe someplace in the, you know, outside of, but if I was in the Bay Area, still no. All right. Let's just wrap up with friend or foe. Shall we do that? Predictions. This is our chance to like memorialize something on YouTube. Prediction for the future on any of the topics we talked about or anything else, and then everybody else kind of says whether they agree or disagree with it, and then, you know, I think it'd be hilarious because I'm sure YouTube comments will be calling us out for like years to come.
Who's going to say Dogecoin to $100?
Dogecoin hits
Dogecoin to 420.
420 is the price target.
$100 or 100 cents.
What is it right now?
Like it went down a bunch.
50 or 60 something cents. It briefly touched 69.
60 something?
Close to 69.
I mean, my theory is it's going to hit 69 cents or $1. I wouldn't bet on it, and I haven't bet on it, but you know, it seems like the meme crowd wants 69 or $1.
So your bet is what? Turn that into something we can agree with or disagree with, Matt.
No, I don't want to make a prediction on Dogecoin because
I'm going to upset the meme on.
That's the whole point, is that way you could be called out ruthlessly for this for the rest of your life. Okay, I'll make the prediction. I think Dogecoin will go to $1 in the next month.
Doge to $1.
That's a tough one.
Is
there a
option? Can we make it conditional?
No, you gotta be
Elon tweets about it again or not?
No, you have to friend or foe that. Justin put his neck on the line for it's going to hit a bump.
Yeah,
I'm going to say foe.
I say friend. I feel like that is a all too reasonable prediction.
I think you have to state your position. You have to state your position as well. Do you currently own any Dogecoin?
I don't own any, but if Matt says friend, I'll put $25,000 in right now after this on my stock trading or my crypto.
I said this is one of those things I don't think anyone can predict. Unpredictable.
Why don't you flip a coin and then tell us what it says?
Yes, I'm gonna flip a coin.
Yeah.
I think it could go either way. Who knows? You know.
Wait, heads is friend and tails is foe?
Yeah. Is there a flipping the coin app?
I think there is a flip the coin app.
I have a coin right here. I'll flip it for you.
Wait, no, I found a website. Random.org. All right. I'm going to say foe.
Well, I'm not going to buy it then. I'm not going to buy it.
It's all over.
You just cost Justin 10 grand.
Did I cost him? Did he cost me 10 grand or did he save me 10 grand? I don't know. All right.
We're gonna find out.
We're gonna find out.
Okay, Matt. All right. Who else has a prediction?
Yeah, Matt, predict us something.
I can go.
Yeah, let Jamie go first.
I'll go. You can keep thinking. I actually will predict that Miami will become like a meaningful, at least second tier startup hub, and will remain that way even I don't know, however many years from now, past this like COVID hype cycle, at least on the order of like an Austin or a New York.
So 3 years from now, same number of like promising startups getting started in Miami as the average of New York, Austin,
and maybe Salt Lake,
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, or
isn't it already bigger than Salt Lake City?
Sure, Seattle.
LA.
Seattle.
Really?
LA or Seattle?
Seattle.
LA.
Okay, Seattle, Austin, and New York. Yeah.
All right, that's good. Mark that down. Justin, do you have some way to keep track of these so we can find out if
Like,
we
it'll
can
be-
I mean, I think
Okay.
I think like there's going to be a general dispersion because of like remote companies, but I would say that I believe Miami will be in the top like 5.
Yeah, I friend that.
I agree,
for sure.
friend. I agree.
And do they have to be successful startups or just any startups?
Like, are we measuring the market cap of startups?
Equivalently, sure, you can measure the market cap of the companies.
Yeah, at like whatever series they're at.
Better. You think it'll be the same as Austin and New York?
I think it'll be in like the top, I guess you could say 4. So like San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, New York, yeah, Miami. I
think I would bet friend on the number of startups being in the top 5.
There, I don't think
Market gap.
The quality might suffer.
The quality, I'm not so sure. Well, I mean, I think there'll be some good quality ones. I just don't think the market cap will exceed those created in New York or Austin.
Okay. All right, here we have it.
So I don't want to make a prediction about Doge, but I will say I think SPACs are going to blow up.
And quantify that. How do we know? How do we know like what will change in the world that will be true, so we can measure this and make fun of you if you're wrong?
There's a Bloomberg ticker called SPAC Index. So I think SPAC Index will probably do much worse than, I don't know, the global equity market.
SPAC Index to underperform global equity market over the next. When do we check in on this?
Let's say a year.
Yeah, over the next year, a year away.
How has it been performing against the global equity market in the last year? It's outperformed.
Probably, yeah, it's outperformed. I think the bubble probably peaked, so in the past month or two. I think it was just like people locked down on their phones, gambling on their phones, drove it to heights, and yeah. I think you'll probably see a lot more regulatory action and a lot more like fraudulent type activity getting exposed, but we'll see.
Why hasn't there been more fraud? I mean, I feel like the frauds kind of came out with like Nikola and, already like in the beginning of this kind of, like a year ago, or maybe it was like 10 months ago. Like but there hasn't been that much fraudulent activity, has there, in the last 10 months, or have I just not been paying attention?
I think the SEC is hugely backlogged. So, I mean, the part of the reason SPACs slow down is they're actually backlogged to even approve the SPACs. So just even approving the SPACs, becoming company is backlogged. And then I think, the SEC is backlogged, just doesn't have the capacity to look at all the frauds. So I think they'll get to them.
Optimistic prediction. All right.
I mean, and to be honest, under Trump, there was not much going on. It's kind of free reign, so I think they have their work cut out for them. But I think it'll happen eventually.
Never bet against Fong.
I'll say friend. Yeah, never bet against Fong.
All right, I'll jump on the bandwagon, friend.
Yeah.
Okay, Emmett, you have a final prediction?
I have a prediction. I was thinking about it. I think it's about the Miami thing, but it's instead of being about the number of startups, I think it's about remote work. I think Miami is like top remote work, like top, 5 remote work hub for tech companies. I don't know if you can measure that exactly, but like, I'm sure somebody will make some report in like 3 years, 2 years, whatever.
Gotcha.
Like, this is where remote workers, this is where remote workers are going to come live and like telecommute.
Miami?
I mean, that seems reasonable because there's no taxes. So
there's no taxes. If the quality of life is really good, it's like, if you like warm, it's like super warm. It's like very beautiful. outdoors
Also,
space.
remote work, people moving there permanently, not just.
Yeah, they're gonna
hybrid working there.
people are gonna move to Miami. You'll see a bunch of people move to Miami, and it's gonna be people who want to work remotely from Miami. Like the tech remote work from Miami population is going to grow a lot over the next 2 years.
I'm a friend
agree
on
with
that
that.
one. Yeah, I agree with
Friend.
that.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees. Yep, friend.
There we go.
All right.
Amazing. Well, as always,
We're
thank
only
you for
friends.
joining. Yes, we're only friends here at OnlyFriends. So thank
We
you
need
for
more
joining.
controversial predictions next time.
Yeah.
I feel like everything should be about Dogecoin and make it basically.
You should have to fix the topic and force predictions on awkward things that are hard to predict. That's good.
You know, we
Exactly.
didn't even talk about cum rocket.
Okay, wait. Really quick mention on
No,
Cum Rocket.
no,
That wasn't on the fact the sheet. Cum Rocket, everybody's newest crypto fad. Don't buy it, please.
The moon.
Unicorn now.
Don't
It's
buy
a
that.
unicorn,
Don't buy that.
right?
Don't buy that.
It's over
Don't buy
$1
that.
billion market cap.
I haven't been following.
You spent so long building Twitch. Instead, you could have just built Cum Rocket.
God, that's so bad. All right. On that note,
It's nice to see
I
you
gotta go to
guys
dinner.
too. All right.
Yeah, good to see
Bye.
everybody.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you guys.
Where's Emmett?
I mean, went to find his AirPod.
Yeah.
Oh, where is he? He's probably in Miami. We should talk about that.
I'm in Miami. We have a whole Miami discussion.
We're
Miami
gonna
bro
have
discussion.
Miami bro discussion. It's the cornerstone of tech.
Cornerstone of tech.
Okay, so
All right.
all right, so
Your shirt looks like you're in Miami.
I am.
Wait, okay.
I sure looks like Miami because I am in Miami.
okay, that's it. Ready to go?
Yeah,
So
why don't you
the
have a
last thing
light,
I'll
actually,
s-
real quick?
yeah,
Let me turn on my light.
okay, everyone turn on your lights.
Do I
Fong,
need
you
to turn
don't
off
have
another?
lights. No, you look fine. You
Oh,
look
go on
fine.
in.
Okay. Do my light.
Okay, everyone turn
There
on
we
their
go.
lights.
That seems better.
Fong actually has the best background. I think the background's going to make up for the lack of microphone. I lost my right AirPod last night.
You only need one. Oh, just as Fong sat down, Emmett got up.
It's a merry-go-round forever.
It's a merry-go-round. All right. fuck you, Jamie. Fuck you.
If you click your
the other-
mouse too much, you'll get shamed by the YouTube commenters.
don't be if people can hear you typing and clicking them if you have a mechanical mouse. So they could tell Michael was totally surfing the internet during our conversation.
Nice.
The